happy to have you here today.
My pleasure.
We've been so privileged to chat on everything that Intel's been doing the past 2 to 3 years. Some really, really great stuff. And looking forward to chatting more about that. Thank you. Grab the clicker and perfect, and there we are. So before we'll jump into it,
Sure.
I thought we should take the time to go through some of the trends and insights that we've seen in the WFA. We've talked about lots in our meetings and set the context for everyone in the room. I mean, clearly I'm looking at a lot of familiar faces here. I think everyone knows what we'll be talking about, but just to set the scene. So we asked this of our members. The question was, how many of you are making changes to programmatic? And a whopping 89% said that they were looking to do this. I think we ran this research probably early 2017. Why? Well, some of you might have seen these research pieces, seminal pieces put out by the WFA and the ANA, shedding light on the murky practices in the industry. For instance, ad fraud set to hit 50 billion by 2025, second only to drug trafficking. If you're thinking about Vice, you might want to think about this stat. Working media, also as low as 28%, depending on your estimation of fraud. Brand safety has also made its way into the spotlight. Some of these articles not new. A lot of them were published, I think, probably second quarter last year, by folks like The Times, CNN, Financial Times as well. So when we asked our members last year, we said, right, well, tell us what your priorities are. And the survey was answered by, I think, about 49 different members across WFA membership. Top priorities: transparency, brand safety, viewability, and unsurprisingly, ad fraud. Brand safety is an escalating concern. We said, right, well, thank you for telling us about transparency. That's of utmost concern. What do you think will be moving quickly up the list? And brand safety jumped in right there. Brand integrity, or I would say defending the brand, your brand values online still remains a concern in the face of GDPR, which came into effect on the 25th of May this year. And that's really put data into perspective for a lot of advertisers. Not surprisingly, many advertisers, when we asked, are looking for alternative ways of pursuing programmatic media buying, moving from agency trading desks to looking at some sort of hybrid internal model. So which brings us to this question right now, and handing over to you. I know you're raring to go. What is the brand perspective in 2018? We've looked at transparency, we've looked at fraud, and then obviously data is a big thing. So let's start with those two things, transparency and data governance.
I see a lot of familiar faces. So what I'm going to speak is perhaps already been covered or people know, so might be repetition. Please bear with us. But it's also the fact that this is really important. Mm-hmm. For any advertiser or a brand, I should say, I think data becomes a primary source of competitive advantage as you go out trying to, I would say, woo your customers or consumers, Definitely. Depending on how you classify them. And if you don't have access to them completely, and that becomes I would say for us, the primary reason why we ventured out here. Obviously not taking away the point of the transparency, the ad fraud, the fact that what you are spending money on, how much is finally go in the actual market versus what is not getting there, is obviously a concern that a finance guy would keep hovering you. And as you would know, in any other company, finance has a big role to play. I mean, they are the money bags. They control what you can spend. And for a marketeer, that's super important to have them in your corner. So between data, transparency, making sure as you said, one of the points, are you being put up against something which your brand stands for? Is the message against something which is totally extremist, or it's an area that you're not comfortable being put aside to? That is definitely an area where no brand would like to be there. So between these 3 points, I think for us as Intel, were those the motivations to understand more about our own customers. Surprising it may sound to a lot of people here, big organizations like ours, and I can't speak for everybody else, but there are so many things happening at the same time that data can sometimes gets lost. And it's important that you bring them all together at one place so that it has access for everybody. And at least for Intel, what we are working at is not only at the marketing side of data, but data which I would say comes along from sales, data from our CRM, data from our financial teams, because they're the ones who kind of keep a check of things. Is all being put together into, let's say, one data lake.
Got
I
it.
can use the right word.
Okay.
And the idea is that at any time, anybody who's got the authority can access to this and pull out information that's relevant to them. So apart from keeping this data at one place, it's important that it's configured in a way that it's easily pullable,
Okay.
can be pulled out, and can be used by the relevant persons.
Okay.
So that's, for us, that's realization is about 4 or 5 years old now, but it takes time. It's not something you think about and you can execute in about 6 to 8 months. It takes a lot of time. And I'm pretty sure a lot of brands would be in a similar space right now, wherein they're trying to see which relevant data is sitting where. And trust me, it takes a lot of time to find out that. And then only you can start processing and building your lakes or ponds.
Oh, fantastic. I like what you mentioned, that it's about consumers, and ultimately you're in pursuit of this data and you're in pursuit of that transparency, so you have more visibility and you understand the consumers better.
Obviously, so if you have access to the people you're trying to reach at a faster pace, you can obviously make changes. You can, it kind of has an implication on a lot of things. I mean, primarily, for people like me who are in media, obviously it's about making the media work better for you. But obviously, those insights can also be used for better content creation, better creative creation, making sure that insights go back to, I mean, if there's a research team looking at more proxies, looking at elements which perhaps we don't think about because we don't know them. And that's I think, one thing that we've learned lately, or not lately, I should been continuously learning, is around that what we think for our users of our products or customers that we want to reach, it's not always the complete picture.
Okay.
Because you are depending on researches that typically take place once in a few months, once in a few years, and then you base a lot of your investments on those researches. They have a lot of value because they are normally based on face-to-face interactions or really detailed questionnaires, but what media or a lot of unstructured data, and I should bring that point as well, which primarily comes from things like your social or places where it's not structured properly, can really give you that real, that insight of that moment. And that, especially from a media perspective, has a lot of implications. We've seen our media work better for us when we have optimized this basis certain real-time performance metrics. For example, if you see something, a certain creative being viewed more, or certain video asset being consumed more versus something else which has very minute differences around your product, and you suddenly start pushing your investments towards that, and you look at which audiences are reacting to it, it always does better. So what I'm saying is not rocket science. It's being done for time immemorial.
Yep.
But the speed at which you do it can make a difference of whether the media worked well or did not work well for you for marketing metrics.
Sure. Okay. I love that it's not just all about the challenges, but about the opportunities that exist. Real-time data, insights, on-the-go planning, and that consolidated data set with pullable data. I love that term.
Yeah. Just made it up, actually. I don't know if it's the right English word or not. But
It's good. We just might coin it, pullable data, that anyone from the organization can use. And it feels like that's a great way to bring the rest of the business
together
and get them on board with everything you guys are doing.
I'm pretty sure people would have faced the problem when somebody from your sales teams or your business units come up to you and say, okay, we did this thing last quarter. What happened to it? And a lot of times, just to do that takes you a couple of days, maybe even weeks to pull that out. Now, if that information is sitting somewhere, which is, again, can be synthesized easily, you could have access to that person, say, here's what you wanted, here's what it is, pull it out and tell me in case you need some help to analyze it better. I think the speed of doing that can be dramatically reduced. And when you do that, you build your own champions internally. And that's important when you're working in a system which has sales, which has marketing operations, finance, and other sides of business. It's always good to have people on your side as a marketeer.
Fantastic. So it's using data, bringing the business into the conversation. It's not always too easy moving away from vanity metrics or campaign metrics. What is your take on that in terms of, is there a role for all of it? Can we look at different sets, or do you still end up going back to business KPIs?
I think essentially, it has to be business outcomes. Vanity metrics, which for a lot of time were like things like your marketing metrics sometimes, because they are, and in all honesty, sometimes very complicated to explain to a sales guy saying, okay, so much, I'm just speaking some terms right now, so much reach, so many people reacted to it, they engage with it. I still get problems when I have to explain it to a sales guy or somebody who's a business unit owner and or a stakeholder and say what it did for the business. It's always difficult to explain. You add elements like a research to it, you add an attitudinal shift to it, you can have more stronger things to take back. But end of the day, the stakeholders, at least for us, are the ones who run businesses. They run their own small companies inside a big company. They are more concerned that whatever investment was made for their business did lead to a positive outcome which can be tangible, which can be quantified easily. And I'm pretty sure a lot of salespeople in the room, it's about quantifiable things. It has to be something which can be put easily, can be explained, and has ideally a dollar term to it. So in those cases, I think all initiatives, especially from a marketing perspective, should be directed to those, not taking away the fact that you need a strong brand, etc. I'm not getting to that side of the story right now.
Okay.
But when you are working with certain sales, have a close sales alignment, then obviously your outcomes should be measured by business outcomes and not just by marketing outcomes. So things like metrics, etc., or specific, especially with media, you have so many metrics and they keep changing.
Absolutely.
And the definition keeps changing from time to time. Every 6 weeks you have a little more in some inside tool, but essentially what it translates into for a sales guy or for a business, I used to say, not even for an individual, but for a company, is obviously more important.
So let's just go back to transparency a little bit and talk about that, both in terms of the cost transparency. You mentioned that's important to know in terms of getting the finance guys involved, in terms of making your plans when it comes to efficiencies.
Yep.
And also the data transparency piece and what brands would expect or almost require from partners when it comes to data transparency. What does that mean for you?
So obviously it's important in the sense that you want to understand that if you're investing money, buying media, placing it at certain spaces, has it worked for you or not? So the transparency is at 2 levels. One, I would say, that's the way I look at it. One is obviously, where did my media go to?
Right.
Now, in traditional sphere, I think it's a little easier. For example, if you're buying print, if you're buying outdoor, there's a very tangibility to it. Somebody saw it, you capture it, you keep it as a proof of performance. Now, on digital, it becomes a little complicated because, especially when you're buying through, let's say, the automated process, let's call it programmatic for simplicity, you're buying on the fly. You're buying in whatever, nanoseconds or something smaller than that, which I don't know what it's called. And the problem is, at times, you don't know where it's going. Right. I mean, you don't always know where it's going. The reason being because at times you're trying to buy for the cheapest inventory, you're buying for the inventory that you think is right, and it's difficult to know whether it's really bought or not unless you have complete control over it.
Yeah.
And that's the genesis for transparency for us at least, is to understand what are we buying and where are we buying it, first of all.
Okay.
Secondly, if you're buying a certain thing, are we paying the right cost for it?
Okay.
Like in any transaction in the real world, you want to pay the right price for something.
Right.
So it's not always about being the cheapest, because I think that's a mistake. Normally, you associate with, let's say, automated or programmatic buying, saying it's the cheapest inventory. It need not be the cheapest in our eyes. It has to be the inventory which works the best for us. Again, linking back to business outcomes.
Right.
So if a certain inventory might cost us, let's say, again, 15% more, but has helped us to convert more customers, or it has helped us given leads which are more valuable, which have converted faster by the sales guy, that definitely is a better inventory than trying to find which is cheapest CPM. I think that's, again, a very used term. So transparency for us is about knowing what's happening, where it's happening, and how we can make sure we have complete control of it, and which moves to your whole angle of data ownership, which is it's all actually connected. It's not separate pieces, but we can pick up as silos and talk about them.
Definitely. I mean, I like that it's about changing the conversation. It's not about cheap media, it's about quality media.
It should be that way, I think.
Which is perfect. So let's talk about that. I mean, I like what you're saying. It's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's not about doing away with it totally, but putting the right measures in place so that advertisers can have control. Let's think about what needs to be considered. We've talked about this. It's people, it's processes, the tech stack. Let's talk about that a little bit.
I think that troika is really critical if an organization looks towards owning more of their media initiatives, just to be in a smaller sense. People, I would say, is the first thing, because if you don't have the people who have the skill sets to run something, an engine like this, it always be a shaky engine. It won't work
For sure.
to what it's supposed to deliver for you. So people and their skill sets is very important, which means you have to invest in people. So people like me don't really come from the programmatic world or
Like people like you, investing in people like you.
so I've actually gained from reading, attending sessions, doing some custom courses. And I'm just one part of a very big machine.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think so people, their skill set, which need to be obviously continuously improved on, because this is a very dynamic field.
Sure.
I come from the Orkut era, if somebody remembers Orkut. I mean, I don't know how popular it was in Singapore, but back in India in early 2000s, it was the biggest social network platform, and today I don't think many of the people would know about Orkut. So the point is that what was 10 years back, or even say even 3 years back, may not be relevant. Snap, I mean, we were all going crazy for them, and right now, you don't know.
Okay.
So it's what people who are ready to be on their feet, keep learning, and most importantly, ready to get their hands dirty, because this is ideally you have to learn by doing it. It's not that you can depend always on an external partner to help you.
Sure.
The more you know, the better you can actually do it for yourself and for the company, the one you represent. And with people, it's obviously technology, because this is the more technology world. It's not about the old IO system. You can call somebody. Your relationships matter, but it's important that you understand how technology works there. Because
Sure.
as more machines come, I think you can't really have a good relationship with a machine, right? So machine is very, very rational. They don't get into emotions. So it's important that people understand that technology. You build that technology, which will come for you. So I can say at least for Intel, I think we have a fairly evolved technology stack.
Okay.
And that investment started happening about 7 to 8 years back, even before I joined this company. So there was this vision to understand that this will be a bigger area of focus, wherein marketing as a whole, media specifically, will move towards. And it's important to build those nuts and bolts right now, rather than trying to build all together. So actually, we started very small, and today I think we have a fairly reasonable tech stack, which helps to convert this vision into actual performance. So people, technology, and obviously process. Now, whenever you involve people and have technology alongside, it's a pretty flammable combination, because if not done the right way, it can go either ways.
For sure.
So process I think, is the most important layer which binds these together. And I'm honest to say, we've learned it by doing it in the hard way. We made a lot of mistakes. You start trying certain technology, looking at a certain, it's worked for somebody else.
Yeah, right.
And when you do it for yourself, you realize, oh, this is not perhaps the most suitable thing for us, because your requirements are very different from somebody else's. So if you don't have a process to constantly keep trying things and dumping things if required,
Right.
without any emotions, you can't really go on its path.
So to have that framework in place.
Exactly. So every new thing has to go towards a test and learn. Give it a little, I would say, breathing space. Look at a 3 month, 6 month, 9 month cycle. And even after that, if something's not performing as you expect it to be, find something else. You can't stick to things.
Got it. Okay.
It's kind of, I said, so machines that you have less emotions there, because a lot of times happens, you build something yourself, you spend a lot of time, energy, slog for it, really make it think it's working. But end of the day, if it doesn't deliver the results which a larger audience sees, then it's had time to move on.
Well, we've talked about people, process, we talked about the technology, the tech stack. Let's talk about partners. There are so many partners in the room. I feel like we mentioned that troika. It's almost like the fourth group.
There are
Many partners in the room.
Partners here.
Absolutely. So let's look at that and let's say, right, well, what do brands, it's that question we get asked a lot. What do women want? What do brands want, right now from partners in programmatic?
Well, what women want, I can't even answer after being married for seven years now.
We'll have to be here till about midnight tomorrow. But
maybe even that won't be enough. So let's not even get there.
Let's talk about programmatic partners.
That might be slightly simpler, actually, than answering the first one. So I said, again, it depends on requirements. So at least for us, I can speak for Intel. So when we started this process, I would say, so to bring elements of more data in-house, have the capability of reaching out to it or finding it faster, we actually went for partners who had, obviously, things like shared vision, who had the agility to give what we wanted, because as I said, it's an evolving field. You can't be dependent on a partner who takes its own sweet time. So for us, agility was very important.
Okay.
And then obviously, I would say be in sync with our system the way we work, because we follow a pretty strong financial,
Yep.
I would say, process in everything that's involved in anything actually, not just I would say media buying or
Got it.
marketing general. So the partner should be in sync with that. And trust me, it sounds very easy, but a lot of times those values don't necessarily have a common ground. A lot of times, you have partners who are great at building something for you,
Right.
but maintaining could be a problem. Because
Okay.
simple thing is after sales service, you start with something, great build up, you start something, 3 months down the line, when you face those bugs, they're not perhaps proficient, or they may not have people who can solve it for you in the time frame that's demanded by your company. So basis that, we kind of evaluated. Yes, we have a mix of a lot of partners. Some of them
Right.
are behind right on the board behind me.
Right.
But essentially I would say those process again comes into play. In terms of evaluating, each of them has been taken the same scrutiny and the same, I would say, inflexibility. And the ones we work with now, and I don't want to name people specific here, but is again, if they're working with us, it's obviously they fulfill our requirements.
Right.
And we see value as a partner and not as a vendor. I always like to use the word partner and not a vendor, because ultimately it's shared goals between you and
Sure.
that company, because both are trying to achieve something which can work for both of them. So it's shared values, I would say, kind of overlays everything than other elements like process and as following a system, for example.
Okay, so I mean, I know we've got to wrap.
Yep.
So I'll just try to sum up everything we've talked about. And I had kind of written it down, and it feels like it's about 7 C's.
Oh, wow,
it's about
you already made 7 C.
that's what you can. It's about consumers. That's the first thing you mentioned,
Yep.
and we love
Always.
that ultimately it's about thinking
Customer is the
about
king. I mean, that's
customers king,
all love
exactly, and making those connections.
Yep.
You talked about particularly across transparency, across data. Transparency is trust. Trust is confidence. That's the third C.
Yep.
And how can we do this? Brands need to take more control. And that's where we kicked off the conversation, bringing things in-house.
Yes, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm not saying that's the only way to go about for a brand. If taking control completely or taking a semi-control, if that makes sense, which could be partial ownership of a stack, or you own the stack, it's run by somebody else. Those models will be obviously specific to a certain company and their requirements for.
Or simply making more informed decisions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Collaboration. I love what you said, that partners that you can really work with. And that's one of the things we always say. It's never us against them. It's how do we all work together as
Always,
an
yep.
ecosystem. Commercial goals. Move away from vanity metrics.
Yep.
And I love these 2 things you brought up: consistency and commitment. You're talking about 8-year investments, planning that's taken 3 to 5 years. It's not an immediate thing you deliver next week.
Yep.
And I really love that it starts with the consumers. We're finishing with commercial goals. It's about commitment and consistency.
Well, that's 8 actually.
8. You've been counting. It's 8. Very lucky number in Asia.
Yes.
So thank you so much for that.
Pleasure.
Thank you for having us.